Hi, everyone.
Greetings. In our last Genesis segment, we were looking at Genesis 1, verses 3 to 13, talking more about the patterns that are very obvious in those verses. But there's also something here that is one of the greatest controversies in Christendom, and always has been, which is the length of the creation days. Mm-hmm. What does the church have to say? Do we have a dogma, a single dogma about the length of the creative days? Well, I have several quotes on the page here. John Davis, Gaussen, and Edward Young, all conservatives, by the way, on the creative days. So this is not a liberal versus conservative difference. This is even within the conservative circles, those that generally get called evangelicals or even fundamentalists. These are the differences that are noted by some of the best teachers on Genesis. First of all, John Davis. The length and nature of the days of Genesis has occupied no small place in current discussions of biblical cosmology. To initiate the liveliest of debates, one need only raise this issue, but far too often the discussion will produce more heat than light. This issue is so highly contested because of its multitude of ramifications, scientific, theological, and philosophical. Without considering these, one cannot arrive at an adequate conclusion. Apart from the use of the Hebrew word yom, day, in verses 5, 8, 13, 19, 23, and 31, where it describes the days of creation, it is used in at least 4 ways in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. And now he lists the ways. The 12-hour period of daylight, as opposed to night, that is in verses 14, 16, and 18. A solar day of 24 hours, in verse 14. The period of light that began with the creation of light on the first creative day, in verse 5. And the entire 6-day creative period. That's chapter 2, verse 4, the conclusion of the 7th day.
He continues to say, how long were the days of creation? Advocates of the literal day theory argue that they were approximately 24 hours long. Advocates for the day-age theory that they were long periods of indefinite duration. Advocates of the literal day with gaps theory that there were 24 hours long, but were separated by long periods of indefinite duration, and advocates of the revelatory day theory that they were not days of creation at all, but days of revelation.
So that's the end of the John Davis quote in his Genesis commentary, Paradise to Prison. Now Gaussen, who is one of the great names of Reformed theology, by the way, and wrote one of the great books on Bible inspiration. And this is therefore over 150 years old, this comment. So this is before Darwin that Gaussen was thinking this way. In a book called The World's Birthday, he says, how long did this day last, and how long did the first day and the third day last? I must simply answer you that I cannot tell. I do not know. No human being knows. There were then no great lights to divide and measure the days. We only know that these days were periods of time, and most probably very long periods. And now Edward Young.
The Bible does not state how old the earth is, and the question of the age of the earth is not the heart of the issue. What is the heart of the issue? No, what is the heart of the issue is whether God truly created, or whether we, merely upon the basis of our observations of the universe, can place limits upon the manner in which God worked.
So even conservatives over the last 200 years or so have argued about what is this account about? And as Davis plainly says, there's no way to know from the account itself which day we're talking about here when we say a creative day, because there's various uses even in the first chapter and a bit.
I think it's interesting that none of them want to pin it down to it. Where there isn't a way of knowing, they're just willing to admit there is no way of knowing for sure.
And that's the right attitude. Scholars often do that far better than the rest of us.
Yeah,
they're far less dogmatic, far more agnostic about things they should be agnostic about than we tend to be. We tend to want clear answers.
Yeah. This is a mark of humility here.
And just fairness to the text. As Davis points out here, you can't make a dogma out of Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 2, verse 4. And then, as Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, we had a completely different take than almost everybody else about this. We believe, when I was baptized in 71, the idea was that we were fast approaching the end of 6,000 years. Around 1975, that would happen, and then the Millennium would come in, and the Millennium was the last 1,000-year period of 7,000-year periods that all made up together the seventh day. So then the seventh day, God's rest day, was still not over. It wouldn't be over till the end of the Millennium. So then you reason backwards from that to, okay, so if 7 1,000-year days make up the great day of God's rest, 7,000 years, then what about the other days, the 6 days before that? They must be the same length. So you reason that makes the world about, well, the world's going to last 49,000 years till God's rest is over. 7 times 7,000. That means we're about 48,000 years into it in 1971.
You know what I'm going to say? This is a guy thing. I really think this is a guy thing, where people get obsessed with trying to figure everything out and invent almost details.
Oh dear.
I'm sorry, but that's my take. Even then, I thought
somehow felt like
I
a
don't
put
know
down.
how they come to these conclusions.
But dear, it's also clear. It's also so reasonable.
Right.
So at least we bought ourselves, the Jehovah's Witnesses bought themselves an extra 42,000 years. So that all the creation occurred in 50,000 years rather than in 6,000 years, right?
Yeah. I think you go back to, this is written to instruct a fairly infant people about the fact of creation. That was the point that Young seems to make. The heart of the issue is that God is the creator. So that's the detail that we should focus on.
God's the creator. Okay, don't we all know that? And the answer is, of course, back then they didn't.
Yeah.
Not even the Israelites knew
People
that.
don't all believe that either.
No, it's true. So we're going to link to this history of Humpty Dumpty. The history of Humpty, which is another way of saying the history of Bible misinterpretation. That's a series we did, I think it's 3 videos linked together. And then also the Genesis playlist, because when we left the Watchtower, we had to rethink all of this and a whole bunch of other stuff too, as to what the right way of interpreting the book of Genesis was.
Or at least what takes were out there that we weren't aware of.
But at the beginning of the Genesis playlist, we're basically giving a little bit of our personal history and the history of some of the friends who left with us in what we had to go through in just revising our view of the world back around 1987, 88. So the Genesis playlist starts with some personal testimony and then gets into Genesis proper in the later videos. See you next time.